How you doing, guys? Today we have a little side project up here on the workbench. A friend of mine reached out to me and said that he has a guy that he knew that needed a little assistance putting this transmission back together. Specifically, this transmission is out of a 1960 wheel horse Suburban tractor. Essentially, it's the same transmission as you would find in a 1958 and a 1959 RJ. It's a three-piece transmission, they call it. Basically, they have two side plates and a cast iron center section. As you can see, the individual took this entire transmission apart and just needed assistance putting it back together. It's not in bad shape, but there is a number of things we're going to have to do with it. So kind of like my big 8-speed transmission rebuild video that I did maybe a month or so ago. I'm going to do basically the same style video, but this time we're going to be doing it on an RJ / Suburban 3-piece transmission. And to be completely honest and brutal, there's really not a whole lot of difference between these transmissions. They look different, and people will tell you that there's some taboo specialty to putting them back together, and really there isn't. They're fairly simple. But let's just kind of go over what we have here on the table, and then we'll start diving in. This will probably be a two-part video, just because there is a bunch of steps to kind of get it all done. Number one, let's just take a look. We have the side plates here. They're in fairly good condition. Somebody did at one time decide to take that little triangular cut out of it for whatever reason. So I told the individual that owns this transmission I would put a little piece of steel in there and fill it back in for them, because they're restoring this tractor. You can see right here we've got some pretty good wear. This is the clutch rod area. I don't know if I'm going to fix that or not. I may not, but that's for a later date. The plates themselves don't look to be all warped. These axle pipes are fairly straight. Sometimes they're actually like bent up because of the weight of the tractor. And if they're bent, you can pretty much throw them away because they're junk. One thing you will notice, there is this piece of pipe, and the differential actually rides on that. And a very common thing is to find these things all scored up like this. So before we put the new bushing on that, I'll take a file and I'll show you that, and we'll smooth that out to the best of our ability. There's really not a whole lot we can do about it. It is what it is, so to speak. These round circles are where the bearings will be pressed in, and I'll show you those. This is where the brake shaft will go through in this area with a bearing, and I'll show you the bearings in 1 second. The side plate on the other side is essentially in the same condition. The pipe is straight. It doesn't appear to be warped, or doesn't appear to be warped that much. It happens. You know, there's really not much you can do about it. It all depends. Again, we have some grooving and wear on that pipe, so we'll fix that. This is the original brake shaft gear, and you can see whoever owned this tractor did not change the oil. Also, you can see this is the inner race of one of the bearings. It's actually fused to the shaft. So this brake shaft, unfortunately, is completely done and toast. So we'll just take that right off the workbench, because we're not even going to use that. The owner of the transmission did provide me with this brake shaft, and it is in good shape. So this just needs to be cleaned and, you know, just sanded down to be nice. This is the original differential. And as you can see, just like the brake shaft, wow, a lot of wear. This thing was run with really, really dirty oil or no oil at all. So very common problem with these is the wear on these cast iron gears, because they weren't hardened. You know, they were cast iron. So he has another differential actually in really good shape here. So we'll clean that up. We'll put that in there. All of the cluster gears and slide gears, and this is the input shaft. you know, they're all in fairly good shape. They just need to be cleaned up. Actually, is this? Oh, this is the original cluster gear, and you can see all the chipped teeth. So this transmission has been through the war and back. Again, this is junk. We're not going to use that. We'll put that down here on the floor too, because that's just not acceptable. He gave me a different cluster gear. He also gave me a good set of axle gears. I'll show you how all that goes together. The axles are pretty much smoked. And the problem with an RJ or a Suburban is these axles run on a bronze bushing, which is pressed into the end of the axle tube. It's not like the 8 speeds or the 3 speeds that have the roller bearings or the Torrington bearings in the axle tubes. So once you get some wear and once you get some, you know, some grit, you know, some real, you know, grooves in there, if you put a new bushing on this axle shaft will just tear up that bronze bushing, and then it's just going to start to leak oil real bad because the shaft actually shifts up in the tube, which then puts excessive pressure on the top of the grease seal, oil seal I should say, and just opens up the bottom half of it, and then the oil just starts flowing out of the axle tube itself. It's a huge disaster, and it's just a perpetual problem with these transmissions. Once they start to leak oil out of the axle seals, you can put a new seal on there, but I can guarantee you very shortly it's just going to start, you know, peeing oil out there. Because of that, and this is my parts bin or extra parts for RJs and Suburbans. I do have these two axle shafts that actually a guy on Red Square made. I don't know if he still makes them, but they're brand new. They were 20 bucks a piece. So the owner of the transmission has agreed to have these installed. So I'll just sand them down real lightly because it's just a little surface rust for being in this bin. So we'll have some new axle shafts going in there. And for the bushings, we have these two larger bushings, okay, and they are for the carrier. One goes on this side, one goes on the other side. We do have these two bushings, okay, and I'll give you the measurements when we put this all together, but they go in this position right here. Then we have a series of bearings. In this case, we have 5 R12 bearings. That's what these are. These are the ground ones, so they're nice and smooth. And then this transmission, because it's not pinned, kind of like an 8-speed has the pins. It has the dowel pins that go in, and that's what lines up the cases. These don't. They're just held in with all the bolts. Well, that means there's got to be a little bit of give because these plates aren't going to line up perfectly with each other once you put it all together. So there's a series of unground bearings, and to be honest with you, these are actually pretty tight. I would have liked to seen them to have a little bit more play in them. I may actually have a better set down in the basement. I'll see if the owner wants to do that, because you do want a little bit of play, because these transmissions can bind up if you don't have them. If there isn't a little bit of slack in the shafts, these can bind up on you. And then we have all the appropriate oil seals, input seal, brake shaft seal, and then the 2 axle seals. This one bearing here, this little Torrington bearing, goes in here. It goes into the input shaft. And again, we'll put this all together and you'll see how that all goes. But for right now, what I'm going to do, let's talk about the big white elephant in the room, and that is the case. The owner said he accidentally left it on his deck. Okay, well, this is going to be probably the biggest project out of it all. I got to get this thing cleaned up. There's surface rust everywhere. So I'm probably going to end up having to wire wheel the entire thing. We're going to have to take the reverse gear out. We're going to have to get these shift forks out because they're all corroded. Kind of a bummer when he showed me that. I was like, oh, cool. But what are you going to do, right? And then in here we have the gaskets for the case halves. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to run all of the parts through the parts washer, and I am going to take the wire wheel on my grinder and start working this thing over to try to get it cleaned up. Right there on the floor, I have all the gears, or most of the gears, not all of them. I wire wheeled them all down, so they're all ready to go into the parts washer. Also, what I have done is I have run the case over my wire wheel on my grinder. On the outside and the gasket face area, I ran my die grinder with the wire wheel on the inside. I'm going to pull out the reverse gear in just a few minutes and clean this all up. I think I'm going to leave the forks in place. These forks are a little bit of a pain in the neck to take out. As there's a little roll pin. You won't be able to see it on camera, but there's a roll pin in each one of these forks that holds it on the slide shaft. And I really don't want to get involved with taking that apart. The slide shafts move nice and smooth already, dry. So it's really no need to do that. I'll Scotch-Brite everything out. I'm going to finish tapping out all the holes everywhere on the case, and then blow it off really good, and it's ready to go through the parts washer. Before I run all the parts through a parts washer, I wanted to just give you kind of an exploded view of what is inside and what comprises of this three-piece transmission. As you can tell, it's not a lot of parts. It's actually fairly simple. You have a cast iron differential with the bull gear already casted into place. You have 4 pinion gears. You have 4 shafts. You have a cluster gear, which is comprised of obviously the center section, outboard gear, and a shaft that they run on. There are, as you can see here, some Woodruff keys which interface with these key slots in the gears. You have the brake shaft gear, which is also might be called a mushroom gear. This end interfaces with the bull gear. This end will interface with the cluster gear setup. You have an input shaft. Then you have a slide shaft. You have your 2 slide gears. This is first and reverse. And then you have second and third. The thing about this is you have to really kind of take a look at your third gear. That's the actual inside of this gear, because it actually interfaces with the input shaft. These coned teeth actually go in. So when you put it in third gear, this engages like this. And is the reason why you have to be very careful when you shift into third gear. You want to make sure that you limit the amount of grinding. That drive belt coming from the motor really needs to be fully stopped before you go into third gear. And the reason for that is this. If you look at this gear itself, those teeth that are engaged, those little guys right there, are really, really small. And when this gear gets worn out, okay, and they do wear out, basically you can't keep it in third gear. The third gear will constantly pop out under a heavy load, or sometimes you'll have to drive with your arm holding the stick in third gear, which kind of sucks. But that's usually the case because this thing doesn't wear out. The little teeth here wear out if it grinds. So you got to be careful with that. The other little thing that before you move on to the last thing, these are the 2 gears that go on the axles. Now these go into the differential. I'll show you that when I reassemble this transmission. Obviously, there's a key slot that interfaces with the axle, and then all the pinion gears will then ride on these axle gears. One thing, and you might say, well, you have another slide shaft. What's that for? And I want to show you something. If you buy gears off the internet for replacements, okay, you got to be a little bit careful. Let me just see here. Where are they? Here they are. I'm losing my mind. Hang on. I just want to. All right. So you got to be careful. And here's the reason why. All right. So now I got 2 slide gear setups. Now they look basically the same, but you might be able to just make this out. See the teeth on this slide shaft? They're fairly small and close together. Look at this one. They're a little coarser. The spacing's a little larger, as well as the teeth. So if you're going to buy used off the internet or from somebody in general, and you need these slide gears, especially like your third gear replacement, you got to make sure that you get this whole setup. Maybe the little gear that slides on the shaft, okay? The first and reverse gear and this. And the reason why is this. I'm going to take this one off. I'm going to take this one off. This gear will not go on. This gear will not go on, no matter what you do. So let's just go ahead and drops on real smooth. Drops down real smooth. And the reason why I tell you this is this. People will ask ridiculous money sometimes for these gears. Maybe $50 for one of these if you want to put your little 3-speed back together. And have seen people just buy this stuff and then complain that it doesn't work. And this is the reason why. Wheelhorse obviously just, had different manufacturers make the gears and the shafts. Not a whole lot you can do about it. And you got to make sure that you get the right, the end of this, the end of that, the distance, all the same. Goes right into one of these transmissions, not a problem. It comes down to strictly the gears. You cannot get this gear to slide on because the teeth don't interface. So you got to make sure if you're going to get the gears or replacement gears, you get the entire setup, because let me tell you, it's a real pisser when you buy one of these things and it doesn't work. This one here is mine. I'm just going to put it right back in my box of parts. This is the one that came out of this transmission, so we're just going to clean them all up and put them together. All right, guys, I think I'm going to end this video right about here, saying it's kind of long. I'm going to run through all the parts washer. I'm going to sand down all my shafts, make sure everything's all clean, and I'm going to weld up that little spot. Not a big deal. You've seen me weld before, and then we'll start putting this thing back together. Thank you very much for watching. If you found this video interesting or semi-entertaining, if you could please give it a thumbs up. As always, leave a comment below if you'd like. Like, share, subscribe, I guess, or don't do that. I don't know. If you could, that'd be really great. I'd appreciate it. And as always, have a great day.